Now, it's my privilege to welcome onto the airwaves this morning Dan Flynn, the Deputy Director of the Australian Christian Lobby from freezing Canberra. How are you today, mate?
Oh, terrific, Matt. Good to be with you. The Gold Coast does sound amazing, but we're struggling through Canberra winter. But look, we're loving it. No complaints.
Now, mate, I think I might have seen some photos of you recently at the Manly 7 football game recently. Was that you there holding up some signs?
Well, that's very mischievous of you, Matt. The reality was that they were mainly Tongan people who were holding up the signs.
Okay.
There were about probably 40. This was organised by ACL, but there was such a substantial contribution by the Tongan community, the Tongan Christian community, who were supporting their Tongan and their Islander rugby players or league players, and they did such a good job at the Manly 7. And while it was a scary thing for many of them to open up their signs saying, support the Manly 7, respect the faith at the Manly 7, hashtag inclusion, we stand with the Manly 7, hashtag diversity. These signs, there were large ones, A2, that were taken into the grounds and opened up. Remarkably, the crowd there was no resistance from the crowd. I think many Manly Warringal Sea Eagles people were very supportive of the Manly 7 and their stand for not wanting to wear a religious symbol as part of their jersey. And they're like, no, that is not according to our faith. We won't wear the jersey. So what we saw there was tremendous courage by those players, and certainly the Australian Daily Telegraph, the Saturday paper, all ran images of these signs that were being held up largely by the Tongan community. And who could argue with the Tongans defending other Tongan and Islander players? It was a great spectacle to behold, and I do know that it strengthened these players. They were greatly heartened by it, and it was they were very aware of it.
Yeah, well, I applaud those Tongan players and those Tongan supporters, because it's a bit like Daniel in the Lions Den, going into a football game and you're not sure how people are going to react, but it's good to see that they got a positive reaction there. And I remember doing the same thing when Israel Folau played here in Brisbane. I remember going along with a bunch of there was a lot of Islanders as well, actually, and we held up some signs there saying "I stand with Izzy." And interesting to see that Israel Folau also went and saw Martin Iles preaching at the Sunny Coast a couple of weeks ago as well. He's still supporting Martin in his speaking engagements, hey?
Oh, absolutely. And Israel's just such a champion. It was lovely that Martin and Israel could catch up in an environment where, it was sort of a non-controversial setting, as it were, and just catch up as friends. So, we honour that man who, obviously spoke out about, God's love and God's judgment, and wasn't well received at the time. But, the word of God, stands forever. So good on Israel.
Absolutely. Well, certainly a big news story over the last couple of weeks. Now, turning our attention to Victoria, Fiona Patten is introducing a bill that would force Victorian doctors and faith-based hospitals to provide abortions and euthanasia. What's the latest on that?
Well, Fiona Patten, she's probably the most powerful person in Victorian politics, sad to say, because she works hand in hand with Daniel Andrews. They require Fiona Patten's vote to get their bills through the upper house. So she, using that power, and she has a bit of sort of celebrity status, has a bill, basically puts down a couple of principles. And I've got the bill here in my hand that nurses and others can perform abortions. An osteopath can. That's kind of, so, currently it's doctors. So she wants that gone. So any nurse or midwife could perform an abortion. That's the first principle. The second principle is that denominational hospitals must provide both euthanasia and medical and surgical abortion. And, we heard about all the safeguards associated with the euthanasia legislation, and she would have been spouting the safeguards at the time. It was just a very paper-thin veneer of her intention of coming down hard on the churches. Basically, she will deny denominational hospitals like St Vincent's in Victoria the right as an institution to refuse to conduct euthanasia or abortion, and she's going to drive that hard. this bill will be in the upper house, could be in the upper house in the next week or so. And we do have a campaign online where people can write to their upper house MPs on this. It's a very, very important issue. And, it shows that, I suppose it'll be a theme of our discussion today that, life is in focus, whether it's abortion or euthanasia. These things are in focus, and they are telltale signs of demonic activity, I would have to say, and the pet projects of the left pushing abortion and euthanasia. We're seeing this happen in a big way across the country. Part of it is a reaction to Roe versus Wade. It's like, in the light of that, the Australian left want to get on the front foot with a number of initiatives which they're pushing out. Fiona Patton's bill is dangerous. And, of course, we must remember we have a Victorian election coming up. And if she's not re-elected, no Christian would shed a tear.
And I'd love to know your thoughts on the upcoming Victorian election. I know that there's been some very extreme left-wing views in Victoria, particularly over the last couple of years. What are your thoughts on the upcoming election?
This election is an interesting one in that Daniel Andrews holds, I think, an 18-seat majority. Now, I've been in Victoria recently. I'm on the ground there, regularly speaking to people. It appears unlikely that he will lose power at this election. Many are very happy that he locked them up and kept them safe from dying, in COVID. That's a perception very many people have. And then, the question is, well, has Matthew Guy presented a viable alternative? And maybe he has, but, I don't know that he's presented an 18-seat viable alternative. So I think the real game, if I may be so bold, is going to be in the upper house. It's likely that an Andrews government will be returned, but who controls the upper house, I think, is the main game. And so we have seen, Matt, some fantastic Christian people pre-selected for the Liberal Party in the upper house, more redeeming, very pro-life, secretary, I believe, of the Victorian March for Life. She will be in the Western Metro along with Bernie Finn, recently expelled from the Liberal Party, will be running as DLP. They're both in Western Metropolitan Region. Renee Heath, daughter of Pastor Brian Heath in the Eastern Victoria, she'll be worth supporting. And in the Southeastern Metro, there's Anne-Marie Herman, another Christian lady. So I think if the upper house can be a firewall to Daniel Andrews' worst instincts, that will be good. And it may also have the impact of either Fiona Patton losing her upper house seat or being pushed to the margins, whereby her vote is no longer the critical one, and she, is a crossbencher whose vote is not critical. So I think there'll be a big focus on the upper house. I have been speaking to Lyle Shelton this morning. Lyle, as everyone knows, is the National Director now of Family First, and he will be fielding candidates and, looking to support these good candidates that I've mentioned and to, push the case for these good Family First candidates. So I think that's where the focus will be. There's a bit of a dose of realism here, that's where we are. It's about stopping Daniel Andrews' worst instincts and bills like, abortion and euthanasia being forced on Christian hospitals.
Well, certainly one to be praying for the outcome of that election in Victoria. And I always pray that God will raise up the right people in the right places. And really exciting to hear about Lyle Shelton taking on the reins of Family First. It's a bit of deja vu. I remember Family First when it first launched many, many years ago. And good to see the second coming of Family First. Let's hope they can certainly have an influence in the nation. Now, turning our attention towards the ACT and Northern Territory, euthanasia. What's the latest with that?
Well, the latest is that the legislation has passed the lower house. The legislation to allow the ACT and the Northern Territory to pass euthanasia laws. Now, there was an Andrews bill, I think in about 1995, and that bill by Kevin Andrews, which became law, simply stated that the ACT and the Northern Territory do not have power to make laws in relation to euthanasia or to legalise euthanasia. There was an attempt to overturn that in 2018, which was lost in the Senate, and the bill last week passed the lower house or the House of Representatives and will be before the Senate. So this is a really significant issue. It's really quite sad that many otherwise credible MPs said, this is not about euthanasia, it's about territories' rights. But look, it's all about euthanasia because the bill they're repealing was all about euthanasia. Look, it'll be game on in the Senate, and Wendy Francis, our National Director, is working hard on the numbers in the Senate because it's not clear. We certainly know there'll be Labor MPs voting against this, Labor senators. There'll be it's a conscience vote. The outcome is stated to be very unclear, and we'll be doing a lot of work in that space to prevent this bill passing. Because if the bill passes, there's no doubt the ACT will legislate euthanasia within weeks of it passing. Northern Territory, not so clear, could be a slower process. But these are some of the challenges we face.
Certainly lots of challenges there. We'll be praying for Wendy and for favour in those situations. And in the ACT, I understand there's talks of free abortions. What's the latest with that?
Well, it's more than just a free abortion because what they're proposing is, look, if you incur out-of-pockets, in order to get an abortion, we'll pay for that. So I think there's an amount of $4.6 million that the ACT government has set aside to, make sure abortions are free in every respect. They're saying, look, you don't even need a Medicare card. If you want an abortion, we'll pay for it. If you've had to get a bus fare, if you've had to fly to Sydney to get it because the ACT couldn't provide it, we'll pay for that as well. So this again is a reaction to Roe versus Wade, and certainly we're making submissions to the Legislative Assembly, who have an inquiry currently into abortion in the ACT, to just say all this nonsense about the affordability of abortions is a cover for basically the promotion of abortion and the destigmatising of the killing of babies. So we're onto it, Matt.
Now, interesting, yesterday at my church, I had a US preacher, and he made the comment, he said, I've only just been back in Australia for the first time in a while, and he said, I know that you've now got, that you lost ScoMo, he's not your Prime Minister anymore. He said, but I'm here to tell you, we can't trust in politicians to change the world. We only need Jesus, He said, just because you've got Albanese, things aren't going to be easy, but you need Jesus. And it was interesting hearing a US evangelist's perspective on what's happened in Australia. But obviously, since Albanese's been in, there's been a whole bunch of changes that have started coming in. One of them is that he's backing the abortion pill distribution by midwives. What's the latest on that?
Oh, well, RU486, it's the two-tablet way of killing a baby. It's very dangerous, not only for the baby but for the mother. And he's saying, well, look, midwives should be able to distribute this. Currently, you've got to go and get it from a doctor, and it's not straightforward, as it shouldn't be straightforward. But he wants to be straightforward. And I think, what we're seeing with Anthony Albanese is sort of a little bit like Joe Biden in the US. He's like, oh, yeah, look, anything that promotes, supports abortion, he's on board with it. And so we see that kind of, I'd call it a Joe Biden-esque approach to, open slather, let's make sure abortion is freely available. And it's kind of a sad reflection that, killing babies is kind of progress, and killing older people is progress. We know Albanese was very supportive of, he is very supportive of euthanasia in the territories. So these are big concerns, and it's just, I think it's a wake-up call for us as Christians, knowing that, wow, okay, so if we're in a game of political chess, the pawns are unborn babies, and this is how politics is played. It's very distressing.
Absolutely. And turning our attention towards the UK, the UK National Health Service has shut down the 102-year-old Tavistock Clinic, until recently thought to be the UK's premier psychiatric clinic. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, probably this is one bit of definitely good news. We see a situation whereby a clinic that was the leading gender clinic in England was closed down because it was found, look, they're putting people on these hormone blockers, and then there's just a path of medicalisation. And I think one of the major criticisms of the clinic was it wasn't addressing, other underlying issues. So if a child presented with, a number of mental issues and quite chaotic, but they raised the gender flag. Well, actually, I think I'm actually a woman born in the wrong body. Then that stopped any other questioning or inquiry about what other comorbidities there were, and just put them on the path of medicalisation. No questions asked. So that was found to be unsafe, and thankfully has led to the closing down of this particular clinic. Now, the question, I suppose, arises: well, what about these clinics in Australia? Because the pattern is identical at these hospitals, and it's not fear-mongering to say that these clinics are growing. The people who run these gender clinics are saying that, look, there's just, they're bursting at the seams. This is what they're saying. And, they're saying, we do the right thing, etc. Don't worry about Tavistock closing down. We always do the right thing. So in a very sort of defensive mode, apart from some brave GPs, including a Queensland paediatrician, Dylan Wilson, most of the organisations, the peak bodies, are saying no, nothing to see here. There's not a problem. But for example, Dylan Wilson says that we must reconsider how we are treating children experiencing gender dysphoria, because as any paediatrician knows, these comorbidities, such as autism, must be addressed and treated, rather than say, okay, well, yeah, now that you've raised the gender flag, we're going to put you on hormone blockers. It's inherently unsafe, and thank God it is a momentous thing that this clinic has been closed in the UK, and it does have real lessons for Australian practitioners.
Well, certainly big news out of the UK, and I know that there is an article at your website. If people would like to look into that further, they can go to acl.org.au, and all the topics we've covered today. I know you guys are very good at putting those on social media and on your website as well. Dan, it's always a privilege to catch up with you, mate. Thanks for the update this week.
That's my pleasure, Matt. Thank you, and thank you to your listeners.